Welcome and welcome back to Rooted to Thrive, Conversations to Elevate Our Humanity podcast. I'm your host, Professor P, also known as Rochelle Peterson-Ansari. And today we have the Rodney S. Patterson, CEO of the Learner Group, which is a consulting firm that helps leaders understand the relationship of diversity and inclusion to engagement. Now, Rodney is also clergy, pastors of church, practitioner, consultant, coach, and he's an author of two must-read titles. The first, Trump in the Race Card. Let me tell you, y'all, it's earmarked all over the place. And I've used it with some of my training clients. Trump in the Race Card, and his most recent book is DEI DOA, How to Create Ongoing Success in the Marketplace and Beyond, comes out this year. Now, here's the most important part to me. Rodney and I met in Burlington, Vermont, where we both worked at the University of Vermont starting in 1988. And Rodney was the director of multicultural affairs, and I led multicultural recruitment in the admissions office. We actually ran together doing some recruitment trips, right? We hit the United States together.
Yeah,
And yes, right. I still always talk about that California trip. Like, we really thought people were going to come from California to Vermont. We got a few. But, it wasn't bad having that Stevie Wonder tour. I think it was his studio tour, and going to see the Arsenio Hall show. I remember that. And so I was 20 years old at the time, which means, Rodney has known me more than half of my life. We also founded the first Black Baptist church in Vermont. It's still standing strong, the New Alpha Missionary Baptist Church.
And you were the first choir member.
He keeps saying that. He keeps saying that I was the first choir member. I also was the church secretary, which to me was a little more work. But it's also even more important that Rodney has been my big brother, a sage mentor in service to students in colleges and universities, in business and in life. So, Rodney, I am so honored to have this conversation with you today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really great. I'm pretty stoked about being here with you. You are on fire these days, and it's fun watching it happen. So, yeah, I've been waiting for this.
Oh, I know that's right. That's right. So we're going to have a conversation like our mini conversations today. We do, when you're in the same line of work, right? You can't help but talk about the work as we catch up on family and other shenanigans in our lives.
Right. So everybody gets the ear hustle on what we talk about all the time.
There we go. There we go. So I am like over the moon excited, though, to speak on the topic, is DEI DOA a pathway forward? And before we get started, I really want you to just share a little bit about your background. Who is Rodney S. Patterson?
Yeah. So I'm glad you started with that question because I get to honor my mama.
Yes.
I'm Nadine Faith Beard's baby boy. That's what she would say.
Yes.
But besides that, grew up on the south side of Chicago as a product of the 60s, big fro, bell bottoms, platform shoes, listening to Motown, all that kind of stuff. And then from there, I really feel like that shaped my life in many, many ways too. But from there, I had a chance to go to undergrad, small school, Valparaiso University in Indiana, and then came back and taught at my high school alma mater. I wasn't expecting to do that, didn't know what I was doing, but another shaping experience. And from there, I taught eighth graders for a little bit. And then I decided to go to grad school at Michigan State University and major in higher ed administration. And that's what led me to Vermont, a place I never thought I would even visit. As a matter of fact, I think you know this story. When they recruited me at one of the college and university conferences, somebody approached me and asked me, have you ever thought about working in Vermont? My response was, what state is that in? You remember me telling that story? Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah. So
Oh my goodness.
that tells you I flung geography, right?
I love
But
that
yeah,
though.
yeah. But as you know, Vermont was probably the game changer in our
Mhm.
lives. We were
Mhm.
young professionals, like you mentioned earlier. Uh, we had a little experience under our belt, but had the opportunity to really spread our wings in
Mhm.
ways that we never dreamed or imagined. Like you said, the California trip, as well as once we found what was probably one of God's greatest secrets in the country, because they were so receptive to Black folks at the time when we got there, even though it was the whitest state in the country. Um, it was game changing because it really allowed us the chance to grow up and spread our wings and do stuff that we never dreamed or imagined. And from there, we felt like we could conquer the world, you know? And so Vermont was really an extraordinary experience. And starting the church, I've started a couple since then. I've had an opportunity to get exposed to a lot of consulting, which started in Vermont. We were doing workshops for free back then.
Mhm.
Didn't know we could get
Yes.
paid, right?
Right.
But we also taught at the college level,
Mhm.
and and then everything that I've done in some way for me falls back to one of those three places: Vermont, Michigan, Chicago. And I guess the most exciting thing that I'm doing now is, I don't know if I told you this, I think I did. I'm actually chair of the board of a university, Madonna University in Livonia, Michigan. And I also recently retired from pastoring. So now I'm raising pastors. And the most recent installation I did, Rochelle, was Keith Bigelow's installation in Michigan.
Oh wow.
A guy that started
Mm.
in our church, y'all, and is
Mhm.
now pastoring in the church in Lansing, Michigan. And so a lot of full circle moments that have shaped me into who I am as a spiritual person, as a professional person, as an individual, all of that stuff. So long answer to a short question.
No, that's okay, because I'm gonna ask you to share a little more because I want to hear a little more about how you got involved in this work, right? The work of uh well, diversity and inclusion
Yeah.
related to engagement. Yeah, share. I don't, there might be a deeper story in there.
Yeah. And that was part of the reason why I wrote the book, to be
Okay.
honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
because when diversity came under attack, I wanted to tell folks two things. The first thing I really wanted folks to understand was this wasn't the worst situation we've been in, and it wasn't the first time that this stuff had come under attack. Most folks don't realize that before diversity was getting attacked, affirmative action was getting attacked. And you'll remember when we were teaching back at the University of Vermont, we were talking about affirmative action. We were teaching
Exactly.
students about the origin of affirmative action
Mm-hmm.
and affirmative action as a precursor to an answer to systemic racism, right? And so I tell folks in the book, Rochelle, that I remember when I was interviewing for the mayor's assistant job in Burlington, Vermont. This was after Bernie Sanders' guy, Peter Clavelle, became mayor. He had an assistant to the mayor position. And I applied and I said, if I'm not going to be considered a serious candidate, then tell me now because I won't apply. And he said, you'll definitely be a serious contender. The question I have for you is, what would you say if news reporters stuck a mic in your face and asked you the question, are you an affirmative action hire? So now we're talking about diversity hires. In the 80s, we were talking about affirmative action hire, which was code for being a Black person that gets hired.
Right.
So this isn't new to us. We've been here before. We know the story. And when diversity hit the scene, it was right at the time that we had started at the University of Vermont. You know, I had some experience at Michigan State, but by the time I got to the University of Vermont, people were really starting to use the word. And they were using the word diversity as the answer to affirmative action and the pushback that was coming against affirmative action. So we thought diversity was the answer, you know?
Right.
Because the folks that created it led us to believe that affirmative action is about minorities and women, and diversity was about everybody.
Right.
Everybody has some element of diversity. And I guess that lasted for maybe a decade. And then we started hearing about diversity fatigue. That was one problem with it. The other problem with it was people got in the door, they got invited to the table, but they left as quickly as they came. So we shifted from talking about diversity, which was about counting people, to talking about inclusion, which was about making people count. You've heard that. You probably have said it, right?
That's
a lot
right.
of the folks on the podcast that are listening have probably either heard it or said it. And then it shifted from that to engagement, but nobody really paid attention to engagement. I think part of the reason was because people felt like a company could experience engagement without diversity. So they kind of pushed it aside. And then on college campuses, more than any place else, this was at the turn of the century, after around 2000, people started talking about social justice. And equity became the word that was associated with social justice. Because for folks that were social justice minded, for us, it was all about fairness. And the expression associated with fairness for us was equity. Now, I even remember when I was still in higher education at the time, I used to say to folks, if what we're doing, if our diversity and inclusion efforts aren't associated with equity, I don't want no parts of it.
That's right.
It wasn't until I went into corporate America that I had the rude awakening that corporate America wasn't ready for equity. They didn't want no parts of social justice. And so I think this is the aftermath of what's been brewing for a long time. You know, Mama used to cook on a low burn. You know, they used to slow cook everything.
Yes.
And they'd raise the heat as they cooked. And that's kind of what's been happening with DEI. The heat's been raised, but it's been on a slow burn. At least the pushback has been on a slow burn for a very, very, very long time. Right?
Yeah.
All right. So
yes.
let me tell you this then. So what I learned, because by this time I had been at this since the 80s. So I'm all the way in 2011 when I become a corporate diversity officer for an entire system of entities in the financial services operation, or what they would call profession. So these folks fund farmers and ranchers all across the country. And that's when I really learned, y'all hear me call her sis a lot. That's how we talk.
That's right.
Sis, that was when I really learned the power of engagement and how important and critical engagement was. And I felt like we missed it the first time it came, because people discounted it and discredited it, assuming that you could have engagement without diversity. The reality is you really never lack diversity. But what I started figuring out was engagement was the secret sauce to success. Gallup was the first to really measure it effectively. And what they found out was there was a direct correlation, there was a direct connection between profitability and engagement. The higher the profit, the higher engagement was. The lower engagement was, the lower the profit.
Gotcha.
The higher engagement, the more successful people were at satisfying clients, customers. The lower the engagement, the direct impact was on customers and clients. Because imagine this, this happens in our communities, in the inner city. You go to a restaurant, fast food restaurant, and if somebody is waiting on you that's not engaged, it's going to impact your customer experience.
Yes, it will.
We see that happen every single day.
Yes.
And vice versa. If the person comes across as very engaged, it's going to positively impact your customer experience. And that's across any race, any gender, any age, any language, any geographic location, any time frame, any of that kind of stuff. So what I learned was when you enhance engagement, you can enhance all the other stuff.
Okay. Yes.
That's it in a nutshell.
Right.
Listen, if you want to know more, get the book.
That's right. There you go. Well, one thing that I wanted to make that direct connection to, because you said they would take the diversity and inclusion out of the engagement. Make that connection for the listeners.
Yeah. So what folks felt like was like, okay, let's use Honeywell as an example. Everybody knew Honeywell back in the 80s and 90s. Honeywell was killing it as a Fortune 100, 500. I can't remember. They were one of them, but they were doing pretty well, but they didn't have a lot of diversity. Okay. And so if you went into a place like that, peddling or convincing people that you should focus on engagement, diversity practitioners would say that's a problem because that means that you're focusing on the engagement of a certain segment of the population. It could just be the men that were there who just happened to be white. That's the predominant population. So it's possible for you to have engagement within that population and everybody else is disengaged. So why should we focus on engagement? So they kind of discounted and discredited the importance and significance of engagement. What I learned by 2000 was it was the exact conversation that we should have been having. As a matter of fact, what we probably should have been thinking about then was seeing the disparity between the engagement of certain populations, certain segments, and unfortunately, Gallup didn't understand the importance of what we now call aggregating or disaggregating the data results. So yeah, you may have white and men who have higher levels of engagement, but if you compare that against women or people of color, or you cut the data, slice the data by age, then you notice that there is disparity in the experience, that one group may have engagement at this level and another group has engagement at this level, which means that they're very engaged, they're disengaged, which translates into you're going to have more productivity with this group than you would with this group. So then the rationale would be, as a leader, let me try to find out what's different about this group than this group and figure out how can I raise the level of engagement for these folks to the same level as these folks, because if I do, the likelihood of me retaining them grows exponentially.
That's right. And what's interesting about disaggregating the data, right, is that it also speaks to having more than one solution. And in fact, companies try to have one solution, and it doesn't, one size literally does not fit all.
Yeah.
And it's common sense that's not so common.
Yeah. Yeah. Engagement is an easy concept to talk
Mhm,
about.
mhm.
It's difficult to put in place.
To implement, yes.
And what makes it so complicated is what you just alluded to earlier. To engage folks, you really have to work individualistic.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's where equity and diversity and inclusion all come into play.
Exactly.
Because what it takes to engage you will be
Yeah.
different than what it takes to engage me.
Right.
And
Right.
people might assume that because we're the same quote unquote race, that what engages you engages me, without really understanding that you can have two people who are from identical backgrounds,
Yeah.
but the factors that lead to their engagement are as wide on a continuum as you can dream or imagine.
That's right. Well, what always perplexes me is that many people have children, grow up in the same household. They see them with their divergent personalities, their paths. What motivates one doesn't motivate the other. They see it in real time, they participate in it and go to work and forget that
Yeah,
they that people have different needs and different things that motivate them. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So we use that very example in workshops to help people to understand the dynamics of equity.
Mm-hmm.
Is the question we ask is, how many of you are raising multiple kids? And for those of you who are, how many of you are treating them exactly the same? And no hands go up. And when we ask the question, so tell us, why is that the case? They say, because they're different.
Mm-hmm.
And then my response is, oh, you mean they're diverse?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
So
Exactly.
diversity matters
Right. It does.
in
Well, you know
such a
what?
way, in
Yeah.
such a way that you
Mhm.
got to treat them differently, but still
Exactly.
be fair.
Right. Right.
You were
Well,
going to
and
say something.
yeah, well, in equity, right? So in the social justice, like if we define from that perspective, equity is meeting the needs of people, right? Giving people what they need, like
It is. And
proportion to what they need, right?
right,
Like, so if one
right.
has more, they don't need as much of whatever that is as another.
Yeah. And sometimes it could be more, and sometimes it could just be different,
Right. It
right?
could be different, but what we do is judge it and decide that somebody deserves more. And like I said earlier, and so that's, when we're starting to deal with our biases and how we were raised and conditioned to think about groups of people. But then there's also this systems approach, right? People in businesses are trying to create systems. I get it, right? But humans are not widgets.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
have to blend the two.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that has to happen, as you can imagine, when we start writing and like us, our writing oftentimes has to be grounded in scholarship. And so we're trying to find the research behind rather than just
Mhm.
pontificating based upon our own personal ideas.
Right.
We're trying to check what other folks are saying about what we have to say or what we think. And so I read a lot of stuff related to this.
Mhm.
And I think one of the things that was important to me to come to grips with was part of what made equity challenging for folks was that it was only viewed through the lens of social justice.
Okay.
It's almost like equity got hijacked by people from social justice ideologies and perspectives. Okay. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I just told you, I gave my own confession when I was on college campuses, because I felt like if you wanted to be true to the work, if you weren't about being self-serving, if you weren't just about profit, it needed to have a social justice connection. Because for me, that the aspect that was related to fairness maintained some semblance of morality.
Right.
But what I realized was sometimes fairness is not really steeped in social justice. When you go back to the example of treating your kids based upon their needs, that doesn't have a social justice connection.
Correct.
I'm just trying to support my kids.
Right. Exactly.
I don't need Frederick Douglass to come in and give a soliloquy about how I treat my kids differently.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
True. It's just that the reality is that groups of people, right? It makes it social. Groups of people have some tangential experiences that affect how they live and their ability to have their basic needs met.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yes.
So, for me, that will always be important, even though it may not have impacted me the same way.
Yes.
Right? Like I often talk about the privileges that I had growing up, and I like doing this work from a place of privilege as opposed to from a place of what was missing for me.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yes. But it helps for people to understand that when they're just trying to raise their kids, right? They want the best for them. I want people to want the best for humanity. Yeah. I want people to want the best for other human beings, because we all were put on this planet for a reason and for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that you're saying that, because two things come to mind. The first is, and I talk about this in the book, I talk about how it's important for us to understand that equity has an element of social justice connected to it. That's undeniable. And it's important for us to understand that. At the same time, equity has aspects and components that operate outside of the realm of social justice.
Understood.
So that's what you just articulated. And the other thing is, and I think that this is hard for folks to come to grips with, is that I think that in all fairness, there are some components, there are some manifestations emulating from the way that we have raised up DEI that has caused some folks to feel justified in pushing back for the reasons that you just stated. They feel like, as it relates to me and mine, I'm missing out on opportunities. I'm missing out on what could potentially be best for us, for my family. And I'm not trying to say that there have been some historical injustices. I'm just saying the way things play out now, I'm victimized by what took place 500 years ago. And I get that. I do. I understand it. I was telling you earlier that I wanted to write the back part of the book, the afterword, I decided to do because a person like us that I met years ago that was really like a protege of mine, When she heard I was writing a book last year, she sent me 6 articles, and all of them bore the title of the name of the book is DEI DOA or some variation of that. And when she sent them, I wouldn't read them because I didn't want to be influenced by or contaminated. I was trying to write an authentic prose, you know?
Understood.
So I decided to wait until the end to read these articles. And the one that hit me the hardest was in the Washington Post. And the person that wrote was in a very salient way articulating all the reasons why this current administration and people that that message resonates with are pushing back the way they are. And so I list all of those reasons in the afterwards saying, okay, I get it. And here's the reality. For those of us who consider ourselves to be practitioners or people who are really trying to help people understand and get where we're coming from, we got to also understand and get where other folks are coming
People
from.
are coming from. That's
You
right.
know, that's part of the reason why you and I have these podcasts, because we're trying to get people to the table to dialogue.
Yes.
You know, I'm not trying to keep folks from what they should have. I just don't want you to keep me from what I should have.
Exactly.
You know, but
Same
I do
thing
at least, I got to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Right?
And that is not promoted. It is not promoted that, like, people want to get their word out and not really hear other people. The listening is missing.
Yeah.
You know, coach to coach, right? The listening, truly listening to understand, not just some slogan that you share at work, right? But
Yeah.
truly, and that actually takes some practice. At least in a US context, we are not conditioned in any formal way that many of us experience, like in our schooling and in our culture, right? We're not really conditioned as a people, like in general, right? Like some people might be. But in general, in our society, people are not conditioned to listen to one another. They want to speak their piece. And I get even the people who are speaking out and speaking up, that was a thing. Like it took courage to even do that.
Yeah.
During COVID-19, I had people I knew that I went to school with, right, who were a little older than me, saying they were proud of the younger staff members who spoke up when the CEO of the company where they worked actually spoke up when the person asked them what did they need, what was really going on at different levels of the organization. So I have someone that I know, right, like that mentored me saying, I don't feel confident in even speaking up because I was trained in our generation not to. And so even when brought to the table, couldn't do it. And then, so that was revolutionary for our voices to be heard. And I know people are exercising those muscles now, but they're also, many are also not listening. Like they feel like they're doing something by just saying something. And maybe that has a role. But if you're not seeking to understand where another human being is coming from, other systems, right? Even the business owner, right? We always want to hold the company accountable. Well, let's talk to the people who run those companies and lead those companies. They're human beings that need to be understood as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And because I'm working with those folks as consultant and coach on a regular basis, it's so important to pause and do that. And I so appreciate you talking about how critical it is to do it. This is the way it had to happen for me in order for me to really appreciate what the author of the article was presenting. I was glad that the whole thing had an audible component to it. And so I listened to it 4 times. I read it a couple of times, but I listened to it 4 times, and it was good for me because I couldn't interrupt.
True. True.
You know, I just had to shut up and listen.
Mm.
And it allowed me the opportunity to concentrate and focus. And for the first time in listening to some of the pushback arguments, what I heard was, for some of these folks, they're not trying to do away with DE&I. That's what I heard in this article. I'm going to send you the article. At the end of the article, the author says, we're not necessarily trying to do away with DEI. What we're trying to do is do it in a way that doesn't create disadvantage for certain segments of the population. And I can appreciate that.
Correct. Right. No one is trying to, in the effort to do the work of DEI, what we've called multicultural affairs in the past, what we've called, many other things. In that effort, no one was ever trying to take anything away from anyone. But propaganda will influence you to think that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Here's the other thing I would say, and I learned the critical distinction between these 2 concepts in the 90s when I first started working for a company called Pro Group out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They taught us using this circle we used to call the no, don't, no circle. At the end of that module, we used to teach about the distinction between intent versus impact. And I think what happened with DEI was it started falling off the rails a little bit. I mean, it's a valid critique.
Okay.
And there's
Say
a couple
more.
of folks that I interviewed. One is Dr. Jude Raquel is her last name.
Okay.
Jude Smith Raquel, I believe it is, out of Vermont. She's been doing a lot of work in Vermont, and she wrote a book based upon the work of her dissertation, and it's called Dismantling Diversity Management.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal read, because she interrogates DE&I, and the other person is this guy named Trevor Wilson, and he wrote The Human Equity Advantage. And now I'm partnered with both of them, and I do work with them. But I loved hearing their perspective on what's right with DEI and what needs to change. And so, in all fairness, if we're looking at it with a fair interrogation of its existence, it did start falling off the rails a bit. And I think what caused it to was when people had great intent without understanding the impact of our practices, our principles, our philosophies, our procedures, where there was some misalignment with what we desired to do and what actually occurred.
Right. Oh, definitely. There were many instances, and I won't take up too much. I won't take up our time to get back into that. I think a lot of people know some of the things that have happened. Like, I'll just give one example because it bothers me the most, and that is when companies would hire people at a senior level and that person is relegated to doing programming. It's like, since when are the senior leaders doing programming? The thing is, the person accepted the job though, like, and they do it instead of
Yeah,
pushing, so it's
yeah,
it's like, listen, that's not your work.
yeah, yeah.
That's not your work. Mm-hmm. Go
I
ahead.
think that's a great example. I think another example would be a person finally gets a senior position, and then when they start hiring, they hire a bunch of Black people. And I'm not saying hiring Black people is not a bad thing. I'm not, don't hear me, listen, don't y'all even try to take a brother out like that. I'm not. But
Okay, explain yourself.
if everybody you hire for every position looks like you or
You're doing the
comes from
same
your
thing.
experience, that's problematic too.
Right. You're
I
doing
mean,
the
that
same thing.
it deserves some questions.
Right.
It really does.
And
Because
it's not just all Black people, right? It's like if you're Asian, all Asian people of whatever, ethnic group, all Latino, Latinx folks, or, of the same ethnic group, etc. Like that's the
yeah,
point. Right.
yeah, because what Trevor Wilson is suggesting is in that instance, what you're saying is all the talent only comes from one segment of the population. And we know that ain't true.
Right. Which is what you're trying to address, though. So you can't, right.
From the get-go, right?
Like you're trying, that solution, the, it's not a solution
That's
because,
what affirmative action initially
yeah.
was trying to
Mhm.
derail and curtail as well.
Exactly. And we
So
know the stories. I hope people know. Maybe, I often give people maybe more credit for knowing some things that I talk about all day, right? And many people don't know. I remember a number of students. I remember students in, I want to say, the early 2000s still had more students saying to me, what their parents told them about affirmative action. Just to make this one point, right? Because
yeah,
we were talking about that was the issue of the 80s.
yeah,
Well, it was in the early 2000s because one, generationally, we're going to teach our children what we know. So that's how we pull it into the future, to be honest, right?
yeah,
So I had young people really adamant about the fact that they knew something about affirmative action, right? And what their parent would say um, that people were affirmative action takes jobs away from them, right? So this was a white male student I have in mind as I'm recalling this,
yeah,
and had to share then, as we probably have to still share with some people now, right? That the affirmative action is not supposed to work that way to take something from anyone. But the bottom line with it is that um, what I wanted him to know was that your there were companies that just instituted quotas,
yeah,
and that I I don't even know that people did it intentionally, but
yeah,
people were hiring people and it was just one race of people, and they were not concerned about whether the people were qualified,
yeah.
and that is problematic, right? And so
Right.
then that
That's
reinforces, when you get people who are not qualified, it reinforces, oh, see, they're not qualified to do this work, right, this whole larger group,
yeah,
because I just hire people based on their race.
yeah.
Yeah, right. Like you still,
That's exactly what I'm talking about when I
yeah,
said, you know, it falls off the rails. You're
right,
spot
right.
on.
And so whether we're talking about affirmative action, whether we're calling it DEI, whatever we're calling it, we're putting the same uh, band-aids on. We are engaging, I think, even a little more intentionally now, because I think people know better, right? And
We want to think they do.
right, I know. I just
We
want
do.
to. I want to, but yeah. So there's still work to be done, and it's the same messaging that we need to share. Well,
Yeah.
before we run out of time, I really would like to. I don't know if these strategies will come from the book you're working on now, or just your sage wisdom. Uh, but there, I know that you have experience. You help other people with practical strategies. And I want to know what practical strategies you would recommend for leaders, for professionals, for everyday folks that they can implement to to help us on this pathway forward.
I'm really glad you asked, because so I've written, as you mentioned, 2 books. The first one was Trumping the Race Card, had nothing to do with the Donald. I started writing before he was even thinking about running for office.
Mm-hmm.
It was an outgrowth of Obama running for office and Hillary Clinton and others accusing him of playing the race card whenever he talked about race during his candidacy. And because we were teaching about race and culture at the University of Vermont, I had some sense about what racism was all about from a scholarly perspective. And so I wanted people to understand through scholarship how racism came to be.
Right.
And so much of it was steeped in that. But I even then says I didn't want to just focus on the problem. So when I first released that book, I think it was around 2011, 12. I can't even remember. It was at least a decade and a half ago. But I wanted to offer solutions. So the last chapter is 10 strategies for addressing race and racism and the use of it. And in the same way, I was thinking about this particular piece being focused on us thinking about what's beyond DE&I. Because the reason why I consider it to be dead on arrival is because I don't think it was ever going to accomplish what it set out to accomplish.
Okay.
I don't think it was ever going to course correct the problem that existed before affirmative action, just like affirmative action didn't do it.
Okay.
I don't think diversity did it. I don't think inclusion addressed the problems with diversity. I think equity set us back into times of civil rights era and affirmative action. I don't think it moved us forward. I don't think it advanced the cause. I don't think it galvanized the community. I don't think it brought people together. In some ways, it really did create more division and more separation. That wasn't the intent, but that was the impact. And so I think the solution that has the ability to bring folks together is engagement. And the reason is because when you define engagement the way that I've come to know it to be, which is simple definition, engagement equals discretionary effort. That's a simple definition. You know, I'm going to get a shirt that says engagement equals discretionary effort.
Yes.
Engagement equals discretionary effort.
Mm-hmm.
And when you Google what discretionary effort is, it talks about people choosing to voluntarily deciding to go above and beyond what's requested, expected, and required. So here's the way I approach it. Here's the way I want leaders to think about this. This is the way every leader should broach this, is to consider what would cause any and everybody I work with, or everybody I try to serve, everybody I'm connected to, everybody I'm trying to lead, what would cause them to be inspired to show up that way 24/7, 365, or however long we're in relationship with each other, because that's what it really comes down to, is us having dynamic relationship. Okay. Doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. Doesn't matter if this is in work environments, church environments, educational environments, social services environments. Doesn't matter where it is or who it is. If there's a way for me to inspire a person to voluntarily want to show up in a way that I'm doing more than is expected, requested, or required, then everybody wins
Yes.
all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
So it rises all boats simultaneously. So for me, that's the ultimate answer. It's the life that you describe us all wanting to live.
Yes.
You know, now here's the thing. From a conceptual perspective, it sounds easy,
Mm-hmm.
but the application of that reality is the hardest thing in the world. And if you don't believe me, try to engage two kids that grow up in your house.
Right.
I mean, to the point that imagine you growing up in a house where if you got two kids, you have inspired your kids to do more than what you've requested, expected, or required of them. That they wake up in the morning saying, "This is going to be a great day. I'm gonna give my best to whatever I'm in."
Yes. And
It,
inspired, not
yes,
compliance, not
yes,
force.
not
Mm-hmm.
told,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not whipped into, you know, not fussed into, now not shouted at to, not manipulated to, but inspired.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
So there's a book I would offer for folks to read. This is not Stephen Covey, his son, Stephen Covey's son, Stephen M.R. Covey. So he wrote
MR,
Speed of Trust.
the
He
speed
wrote
of
he,
trust.
he wrote 3 books, Speed of Trust, because
Mm-hmm.
what I learned was trust and engagement go together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, the more people trust you, the more likely they are to engage.
Yes.
The less people trust you, the less likely they are to engage. So he calls trust the accelerator to engagement. The higher the trust, the higher the engagement. The lower
I
the
like that.
trust, the lower the engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Brilliant
Yes.
guy, like his dad.
Mm-hmm.
So he wrote 3 books. He wrote Speed of Trust. Then after that, he wrote um, Smart Trust. And the last book he wrote, and this is my favorite, is Trust and Inspire. Because he talks about what it means to really inspire folks, not motivate them. You know, motivate is external. I got to do something to you to motivate you. When you inspire, that's internal.
It's from the inside.
It comes
Yes.
from the inside. So I awaken, or I help to awaken what's already in you
Mm-hmm.
that you're motivated to do on your own, right? So he makes a distinction of what inspiring people is like versus motivating them. And when you're inspired to engage, it's a whole different level. And I'm
Yes.
telling you, everybody wins.
I love it.
That's
Everybody wins. And
yeah,
that's what
that's the world we're trying to create.
that's right. One where we all win. Wow, that was a powerful mic drop right there. Powerful. No, seriously. I was thinking to myself as you were talking, every coach needs to hear this. Well, it should resonate for every coach, right? Because the real deal when you're coaching is that we know that you don't solve problems for other people. First of all, you help them co-create, and it comes from within them.
And
Yes.
I can tell you from firsthand experience, because I did a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work with NCAA teams.
Mm-hmm.
I'm even doing a lot of work with entire programs now. Grand Valley State University, they socked this up. Went back to Michigan State. D'Antonio, when he first heard the message, he said, "Rodney, I got to have some of that." Um,
Yes.
4 seasons with the 49ers. Mike Nolan it got him up out of his seat and on the board, trying to understand these concepts, you know,
Yes.
because you're right. When a coach gets it with a player,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Professional athlete, student athlete, doesn't matter. When a coach gets it,
Mm-hmm.
even if they don't win every game, what they get is I tell people their leaders are going to have folks that fall into three buckets. Those who will work for you, with you, or against you. For you, with you, or against you. With you is really good. Because those are the folks that are going to make sure that what needs to get done gets done. Against you is misery.
Right.
Those are folks who want to kick off and kick out. The ultimate is for you, because those are the folks that got your back.
That's right.
They'll run through walls on your behalf. And I tell leaders every day, you get to choose how folks show up on your behalf. You every day. As a leader, you have more ownership in this, because your job is to figure out who you want to choose to be on your team.
Yes.
You get
Indeed.
to.
Yes, indeed. Well, Rodney, this was a powerful, 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 powerful conversation. I hope people listen to it over and over again, right? Because they're gonna miss it. Some people gonna miss this whole discretionary effort. What do you mean by this this engagement thing? I encourage our listeners to just listen to it, even just that segment over and over and over again, so that you can get it. And I just want to say thank you. It really has been an honor to have you as a guest today. We're going to let the people go soon.
Yeah. No, it was great being with you. If you're a part of it, I want to be in it. So
Yes, indeed. And likewise. Well, with that said, is there a way for people to find you or contact you after this episode?
absolutely. www.thelearnersgroup.com. That's the company.
Mm-hmm.
They can find me the engagement coach. That's the new brand where we're promoting all of this stuff. And they can even find me on www.trumpingtheracecard.com.
There you go.
Any other dots. But the engagement coach, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff too. So
Yes, yes. All right. Well, good stuff. I want to thank you again and again. And I want to thank our listeners because you make this happen. You make this possible. I want to thank you, everyone, for stopping by. Please, please, please leave a comment, subscribe, and share this episode. Thank you again for listening to Rooted to Thrive.